Animation is nothing new, and certainly clay has been around since well before the wagon trains. But clay animation? Well, that's something fairly new. Portland filmmaker Will Vinton has been doing clay animation since 1973, when he and sculptor Bob Gardner created their first theatrical short film, the 8-minute Closed Mondays. The film took about 12,000 single-frame movements and 13 months to complete, but the diligence paid off. Closed Mondays won an Academy Award. A trade name for this special brand of animation was essential. Vinton decided to call it That's three-dimation. Meet Will Vinton. He'll tell you what three-dimation is all about.
Okay, three-dimation is a process of play animation. The word comes from three-dimensional play animation. We've used the name essentially to sort of describe our particular kind of clay animation and set it somehow apart from maybe perhaps other people's. Clay animation is an old technique. We didn't invent it by any means. It's a really old technique. Kids have done it forever, as a classroom tool, animation learning technique a lot, and there's some real classics of clay animation around. But we've taken on doing things in some more realistic manner, using full color characters and so forth, trying to do really fine detail, playing with metamorphosis kinds of things, a lot using the medium in a lot more an expressive way to do stories and things like that. And so really it's just a name that we've put on it, trying to say that maybe this is something a little bit different than this. It came about initially, started the process of play animation actually when I was in college. I started with three-dimensional kinds of animation. We studied architecture in school, and we moved models and things, cars through buildings, and did animation of models, architectural models, as a means to study how a building might look in reality, or a model might look in reality, using a camera to actually animate things moving through it. So that's where I first did three-dimensional kinds of animation, and then met up with a sculptor, Bob Gardner, in Berkeley. I was down there, and together we experimented around with clay in particular, and trying to create little film ideas with clay. Well, actually, then about 5 years lapsed after that, during which time I was doing commercial filmmaking of various kinds, documentaries and some cell animated films and so forth, and a few small kinds of commercial three-dimensional animation things, moving objects and so forth. As we perfect the techniques, I think a lot of the techniques become less of a challenge, but we keep creating new things, new problems all the time, and that's sort of the fun of it. It's every film we do, we try and invent camera moves, for example, that are things we've never done before, that are some kind of require some kind of crazy camera rig to carry the camera off and make it seem very much like very light and not restricted to kind of tabletop model setups, camera sitting on tripod. You want to try and create the illusion that it's like a live action production, in the sense that you've got helicopters available to you and big cranes and dollying shots and all those kinds of things. And as I said before, I like the idea of kind of playing with the conventions of live action production, and using those as a kind of tool to create moves, to create thing. In other words, one way of looking, sort of off the subject maybe, but live action productions, we're so used to seeing them and the conventions that they use for editing and cutting, going to close-ups, doing camera moves and so forth. We see those and those begin to mean certain things. They're symbolic sort of things. And by using the same techniques in the clay animation, the same moves, the same kind of cutting techniques, you're borrowing on those experiences, those moods that live action producers have created, and imparting them onto the clay characters. We don't really create totally new techniques. Nothing that we've done or anybody's done, including the people that did Star Wars and I mean, there's hardly anything new under the sun. And I'm sure that for everything that we could say we've done that's new, it's new to us, new experiences for us for sure. But there are definitely those things have been done, pioneered before us. But for our own sake, we are, as I said before, constantly elaborating on a repertoire of kinds of camera moves and camera shots and the way we can move it around. We're all elaborating on the kinds of armatures that we use for characters and for objects to support them, give the clay strength and so forth. We're elaborating, as I said, on ways to make things fly and ways of matting, using optical effects to combine live action scenes and clay scenes together in the same frame. We're constantly trying new and different ways too of the use of a reference film as guiding the animation, studying motion of real people and so forth as a guide for the animation motion. And so there's a whole lot of things, but like I said, none of those things are brand new.
Vinton's company, Will Vinton Productions, has produced several clay animated films since Closed Mondays, including the 9-minute Mountain Music and a half-hour television special, Martin the Cobbler, both recipients of numerous major festival awards. Will Vinton Productions is currently working on a second half-hour TV special, Rip Van Winkle, adapted from the story by Washington Irving. Some personnel changes over the years have brought a mainstay to the company in former architects Barry Bruce and Don Merkt. Bruce and Merkt split and share the full-time duties of sculpting, set building, and animating.
Well, there's a lot of different things. It's pretty neat. It's pretty nice to actually be able to do some kind of creative work and really be able to make a living at it. There's a lot of people I know that are really creative and do really good things, but have a heck of a time doing, really making a living at it. But for me right now, I think the neatest thing about the clay animation is that you can get 8 hours a day experience of constant sculpting, which is pretty outrageous. It's a really good experience.
I think it's just the excitement of a new medium they haven't worked in before. I think I'd compare it with what my like we've talked about before, past experiences with working in just cardboard and architecture and wood and clay is so plastic that you can make it look like anything, and you can do really fanciful things with it, and you don't have the structural problems you have with other things. So it seems like it's just a medium that has a lot of potential, and more potential than limits, I think.
The remainder of the crew involved in the production of three-dimension films with Vinton consists primarily of part-time and contract talent. Musicians Bill Scream,
oh, hi, America,
and Paul Jameson.
There's a bee there, and I was going to...
Writer and Vinton's wife, Susan Shadburne, and a Whitman sampler of other animated characters. So, how is a three-dimension film assembled? Do they just start shooting and hope for the best? Well, not quite. First, a story must be chosen. Then the story must be adapted to appeal to a specific or broad target audience, depending upon the intended market. Then, the camera moves are worked out and drawn into a storyboard form with the shooting script. Next, the voice talents are chosen, then filmed and recorded simultaneously in the sound studio. The actors are filmed to provide a live-action reference upon which to base every movement, gesture, and expression on their clay counterparts. Then the characters are created and the sets are built. The sets are almost entirely clay-covered wood and different mesh gauges of cage wire, with a few lichens stuck here and there to simulate trees. The characters are sculpted over steel and brass armatures with movable joints, as seen in this time-lapse excerpt from Will Vinton Productions' three-dimension documentary.
Oh, they do resemble real people. Hopefully they resemble real people. They're supposed to look like real people. They, but oftentimes, for a particular character, you'll take somebody that you know that seems like they sort of fit the kind of characterization this person's supposed to do, and it helps in animating. You have a sense, you know, somebody that reacts in certain ways, or you've seen people do that, and so you naturally copy them, sort of. And sometimes we copied them very blatantly. In mountain music, that's probably the most blatant example. We copied Billy Scream as the drummer in mountain music, and we also copied Paul Jameson, his partner, who both created the music of mountain music, as the guitar player. And however, the woman was sort of made up, but although she looks like other musicians, sort of made up.
Vinton has utilized the talents of musicians Scream and Jameson since the inception of three-dimension, and he's put them to work once again on Rip Van Winkle, this time with lyrical assistance by Susan Shadburne. An accomplished musician herself, Susan also scored the original melody lines for Rip's theme songs. Keyboard band Scream and guitarist Jameson are responsible for the arranging and orchestration. They take their profession pretty seriously, as you might guess.
I met Will in the back of a car. I've met a lot of people in the back of a car, and I don't mean to dilute our relationship in any way, but I was much younger and a foolish youngster at best. No, I was only about, I was about 6 or 7, and he and I were just playing in the back of this car because his father was a car dealer, and we met each other there. I'm sure this is this is prophecy we're talking about now, fulfilled.
Oh, this is...
Anyway, I think this was told about a long time ago. But we met, and he went to a different grade school, but then eventually we went to the same junior high and high school, and he was in sports and football, and I remember he had a camera, and we used to take these funny little movies, but I never considered him really a cinematographer, really. Then after he came back from Berkeley, going to college down there, he was all of a sudden he was a filmmaker. I think he had a transplant.
He may have.
So I had turned so-called professional by then too, and I was in Seattle, and so we started doing a few things then, and that, in fact, where the music from Closed Mondays came from, was my time in Seattle. I started just playing in bands when I was in high school. Learned Louie Louie was my first song, and I learned how to play 7 chords in my first band. Didn't learn how to play minors in my first band.
It was a major band.
It was a major band. Now the second band, when the Animals came along with House of the Rising Sun, you had to learn minors.
That was my first tune.
In fact, that was the first turn. And so we go to Paul. What was the first song you ever learned, Paul?
The first song, thank you. Are you interviewing me now, or? The first song, I'll tell them in my own way. The first song I ever learned was also House of the Rising Sun, and that had several minor chords in it. That was, in fact, my first guitar experience, we call it, I guess. And that was also coming from playing in bands. I had 4 brothers and sisters who all played instruments, and so I picked up guitar from my brother. Did you ever have show and tell in grade school?
Hey, wait a minute.
No, seriously.
Oh, okay, well.
No, so we used to, in grade school, used to have, like, every Friday you'd get up and, like first grade, you'd get up in front of the class and they'd say, what can you do? So I had to do something. So I'd sing, and pretty soon people would say, why don't you play an instrument in lieu of singing?
You ought to be a star.
Because you don't sing very well. So I got guitar, started playing guitar for show and tell. They let me do that.
I'd like to interject here, incidentally, just for the record, that when I was in high school, my choir teacher kicked me out of choir because he said I didn't know how to sing, and also at a similar time my music teacher, who taught me piano, told me that I was the worst composer she'd ever heard of. And I'd just like to put that on the record.
And he's living proof of that today, in fact.
This is where we record a lot of the music for Will's films. We do some of our work on the 4-track, as you see here. Can you see that, in fact, America? And we have a 2-track that we mix down to, and we have all kinds of recording equipment here. Monitor, amp, all the usual stuff that every studio has. The only thing that we don't have that most studios have is size. As you can see, I can practically reach one wall to the next, and we work in a small space. This is because I'm small. We have, would you like to come into the other room, America, and we'll show you where some other things happen. Now, this is where we play. That's right, America. I actually play the piano on this stuff. Now, in fact, right here on this very piano, you've heard all the tracks from Martin the Cobbler, many of the pieces from Rip Van Winkle. We put all of our sound effects from the film Freedomation. All those were done here. I've sat in this corner many a time thinking about a lot of things that have eventually gone on television and radio, and you're in fact seeing the very spot that a lot of things happen. So, I thought I got a little song here I'd like to play you. Is the tape about ready to run out? You will edit this for me, won't you? Yes. Thank you. I only know one song. Oh, excuse me. I only know one song because that's the only one I'm working on right now. But.
Have heard about some film industry drawbacks, budget entanglements, talent feuds, screenplay rights, and the like. But what could possibly go wrong with a slow-paced, controlled process like Freedomation?
Sometimes it's very difficult to do exactly what you want to do, like you can in cell animation, because clay has weight. It has to be sitting on something or supported by something, whereas a cell animated character can fly and can be up off the ground very easily. It just has to be drawn up off the ground. That's all there is to it. Clay objects and characters and so forth have to be somehow held up to do things. So it's hard for them to run and jump and fly and do those kinds of lively things. And we spend an awful lot of time trying to figure out tricks to make that work and make it work better and smoother. We're having problems with Rip Van Winkle. The biggest problem right now is that we're switching all over entirely to 35mm for our shooting, and that's really just a technical problem. It's no small problem for sure, because it's not just, though we've got the necessary equipment and so forth and we're geared up, we aren't exactly in a film capital of the world in Portland, and it's pretty tough to find the services that we need here. In fact, there are no services in Portland for 35mm, so we have to send most of our processing and so forth. Prints have to be made and so forth in LA or Seattle. Some things can be done in Seattle. So that's been a real thorn in the side of Rip Van Winkle so far, but I'm very pleased with the results of Rip Van Winkle, and I think it artistically is really superior to just about anything we've done, I think, and I'm real happy about that. So the technical problems will get ironed out soon, things will go smoother, I'm sure. Contract deadlines are always a problem, but we haven't had too much problem with it, fortunately. We've also worked with people, producers, that have been a little bit flexible, but we've come in on time pretty well. The whole problem, though, with getting one of these productions done on time is that every project is a brand new problem, is a brand new thing. It requires, its own all brand new solutions in a lot of cases, and it's very difficult in the beginning of a project to foresee just exactly how much time that's going to take. That's not true in some other kinds of production where there's a lot of things have been done before, like it, and there's a pretty clear you have a pretty clear image of just exactly how much time it's going to take realistically. But so in that regard, I'd say we've really done pretty well in terms of coming in on time. We were a little bit over time with Martin the Cobbler, and we're going to be a little bit over time maybe with Rip Van Winkle, but only probably 10% over. In general, I don't think there are too many problems with it, or we probably wouldn't be doing it.
Sometimes things start slowly getting out of control, and I think we don't say anything, but sometimes it's real tense, and you can tell that Barry and I never fight. See, this is the thing, but we could. There's some times where we probably could, and I don't know if I want to talk about this.
Well, I think what it does to you mainly is it gets you real anxious toward the end of the thing. You get tired, but you get tired doing anything for a long stretch of time. But when you get all that camera in the film, for me, and I know all that are all the film in the camera, how does that work?
That's what
Don handles that. That's the thing about working 8 hours a day. It really helps to be in a mood. Some days it goes a lot easier than other days, and it just flows right along. But you got to do something every day. I mean, you can't just come in and say, well, today I don't feel like it, so I'm not going to do it. Some days it flows better than others, and some days it doesn't, but you can always make something happen.
There are more problems than anything I can think of putting music on, I think, is trying to... When we first get together and start working on it, we're working on just from scripts, usually not even the final script, and so it's really rough ideas that go back and forth. But by the time we get to a final script, then we're pretty heavy into it. We very seldom see some film unless we see the reference film. But usually we would like to have it sync really, in every possible way it can, and every second the music's doing something, and then the action does something, and be very close in sync with what's going on. But you don't get a chance to do that sometimes. So the problem is how much can you do and still get it done in a reasonable amount of time and still make it sound right?
You're usually, when you start out, you think you have a really good idea of what you're going to do. In other words, you say that this is going to turn out great. I've got it all in my mind here. This is before anything's laid down. And about halfway through, you start getting kind of a panicky feeling. Oh, he's going to cut this and he's going to cut that, and this song isn't going to make any sense anymore, and my, the best intro that I've written, my whole career is going to be cut out, and then at the end, when you get the emotional, there's a real emotional high of seeing the thing, and 9 times out of 10 it turns out a lot better than you thought it would then, and you go, oh geez, I'm a genius, I did it right, but there's a lot of worry involved in in the middle of it, when you're right in the midst of it, as to whether it's all going to come together or whether it's just going to make no sense at all.
Does 3Dmation hold a guaranteed position in the field along with its already well-established cell animation competitors? Disney, after all, has been in the cartoon business longer than most of us remember.
Yeah, I think we're in competition with cell animation. Clay animation does some things much better than cell animation. Cell animation does an awful lot of things better than clay animation. So you have to be very careful about using any of those mediums, I think, in ways that work well with that particular medium. I've done a number of small-time commercials in cell animation and limited cell animation, sort of product films and kinds of documentary things. But my experience in cell animation is fairly limited, actually. I had a lot more experience probably in three-dimensional types of animation.
Which do you prefer, should I ask?
Well, I definitely prefer three-dimensional animation, in particular the clay animation, three-dimension that we do. It's a lot more exciting to me. There's a lot of things that, for one thing, you're really working in real space. You're working with real characters in real space. They have these problems of weight and so forth. They take on personalities. You're building sets around them and so forth, and moving cameras through them. And when you shoot, every scene you shoot is like shooting live action, in the sense that you're performing in front of the camera. The characters are performing in front of the camera. It's not until you get the footage back that you know what it's going to look like exactly. And that's a sort of an exciting thing. It's also a very tenuous thing, and it's scary sometimes. And we get very nervous about viewing the rushes when they come back. But it's all that makes it fun, and it's the whole long process of shooting is enjoyable because it's that kind of experience. Whereas cell animation, after a fashion, once you get the cells and so forth designed, then it takes a factory of people, or else somebody who spends an incredible amount of time just grinding out the cells and making them come to life on film.
For all its painfully slow, tedious hours upon hours of frame-by-frame shooting, sculpting, there must be some reward for the practitioners of this medium, which would drive any normal person insane.
I'd say the greatest satisfaction in doing these three-dimension productions is really that of completing a project. The projects are very long, involved, detailed. They have a lot of elements that have to come together: music and voice talent, voices, and editing and technical problems, artistic problems. And it's like a big problem. And the whole process of making films like this is a process of problem solving and finding a solution that works, that makes things move and all that sort of thing.
What is the driving force behind Will Vinton and his slaves, cohorts? Well, that we may never know. But perhaps, even in three-dimension, the end justifies the means. Or is it the means justify the end?
Outrageous.